She had a reputation as a formidable politician and often referred to as the Iron Lady. Just a few hours ago, Baroness Thatcher's body was taken to an undisclosed location in preparation for her funeral. It'll be held with full military honours at St Paul's Cathedral and is likely to take place next week.
The body of the late Baroness Thatcher has now been moved from London's Ritz Hotel, where she spent her final days before dying at the age of 87. The first and only female British Prime Minister will be honoured with a service of the scale not seen for a former Premier since that of Winston Churchill half a century ago. She will receive a ceremonial funeral with full military honours at St Paul's Cathedral in around a week's time. While famously divisive, many turned up outside the five-star Ritz Hotel to show their respect and appreciation for the Iron Lady.
Well, as you can imagine, Margaret Thatcher is dominating the front pages in the UK. The Guardian says she became harder than hard. The Daily Mirror describes her as the woman who divided a nation. And The Sun, as usual, a little more gritty, with Maggie dead in bed at the Ritz. The Northern Echo is one of the leading papers in the north of England, where many of the miners' strikes took place. It perhaps sums her up best: loved, hated, never forgotten. There's also been reaction from around the world. The US President, Barack Obama, called her a great champion of freedom and liberty. And James Baker, the former US Secretary of State, said she changed the world.
Hers was the first victory in a succession of conservative victories in other countries. Here in the United States with Ronald Reagan, Germany with Helmut Kohl, Canada with Brian Mulroney. And she changed the arc of history, not just in the United Kingdom, but also in the world.
Well, even Margaret Thatcher's supporters acknowledge she could be a polarising leader. Fellow Conservative and current Prime Minister David Cameron cut short a European trip when he learned of her death.
We can't deny that Margaret Thatcher divided opinion. For many of us, she was and is an inspiration. For others, she was a force to be defined against. But if there is one thing that cuts through all of this, one thing that runs through everything that she did, it was her lion-hearted love of this country.
And former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair said he admired Lady Thatcher for her strong convictions. Take a listen.
I agree with her, disagree with her, but her character is undeniable. The strengths of her views were not just things that she held as views, she wanted to implement them, and she was determined to do so. And that concept of a conviction politician that shows real leadership, that's worth something. It really is worth something. And it's why, even if you're from the Labour side of politics, you've got to say this was a big figure, a towering figure, who made an impact not just in our country but worldwide.
Praise echoed by Conservative Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who highlighted Thatcher's economic legacy.
This country has just lost its greatest Prime Minister since Winston Churchill. And Margaret Thatcher was a revolutionary and she was a liberator. She freed millions of people to buy their own homes, to buy shares in British companies.
A divisive figure in UK society, some politicians appealed for sensitivity from the media in their reactions to news of her death, criticising many left-wing commentators for publishing negative accounts of her life and policy. Leader of the opposition Ed Miliband was more measured. He paid tribute to a woman he called a unique political figure who defined her era.
Now, of course she was controversial. We disagreed with much of what she did as a Labour Party, but we can disagree and also hugely respect her extraordinary achievements and her extraordinary personal strength.
Queen Elizabeth said she was saddened to hear of Margaret Thatcher's death. The late Prime Minister's to receive a ceremonial funeral with military honours at St Paul's Cathedral. This is just short of a full state funeral, a prospect that had already prompted angry debate in the UK, with the country divided over whether the first female Prime Minister should receive such an honour.
Conflict was a key characteristic of the Thatcher years, and 23 years after she handed over power, the Iron Lady remains a hate figure for some. People gathering at the site of one of the worst protests of her time, in Brixton, where they rearranged the cinema listings. But, despite the divided opinions, reflection was in no short supply this morning, front pages bearing the image of a woman who changed the landscape of British politics.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to.
Defiant in the face of opposition, Margaret Thatcher was never short of self-belief.
The lady's not for turning.
Loved or hated, she was a politician who inspired passion in people, and her legacy has shaped a generation in Westminster.